Welcome to the Week 12 College Football Power Rankings. It was a weird week because we have a new number one. Let's start at the top. The Oregon Ducks struggle a little bit with Cal before pulling away, winning by 42 points. Sure, the schedule hasn't been what other teams has been, but they've blown out everybody and look completely dominant, so we're going to keep them at number one just like the polls have them. Kansas State at number two, number one in the BCS. An impressive victory on the road against a TCU team. Sneaky team. They don't really have a quarterback, but it was a good win nonetheless, especially with Colin Klein's injuries. The big game, of course, will come against number 15, Texas, final week of the season at home in Manhattan. It's going to be for a berth to the national championship, most likely. So that's a huge game. Notre Dame, it's an okay win against Boston College, the worst team in the worst BCS conference, but they're undefeated. I'd have them lower for their general performance these past few weeks, but the 0 in the loss column still means something. Alabama, of course, drops to 4 after losing at home to Texas A&M. A kind of uninspired performance from the Tide, but they were in it at the end. They're still a top 5 team, there's no doubt about that. LSU proved themselves also to be a top 5 team in a loss against Alabama, but this past week they looked very good against Mississippi State, especially on the defensive side of the ball, sealing that game with like a 1,000,000-yard interception for a touchdown return from Craig Loston. So they're looking quite good, although the SEC West, it's probably not going to happen for the Tigers. Texas A&M up to number 6 after their huge win against the Tide, but still behind LSU because of the loss in College Station. We still take the whole season resume as a whole into account, but they're looking quite strong at the moment. Georgia finally pulls away from a lackluster SEC team. They've struggled with Tennessee and Kentucky, but get by Auburn quite easily, dropping 38 on the Tigers. They only have Georgia Tech left. They're in the driver's seat for the SEC East, and they have what appears to be Alabama in the SEC championship game. They have an opportunity to be in most likely just a BCS at-large bowl, but the Bulldogs having a very nice year. Florida struggles with Louisiana Lafayette, which is why they're not higher. Big wins and just awkward wins all at the same time. Nobody goes for over 100 yards on that offense. Florida just looking big, dumb, and sloppy, but they get the win. Ohio State not eligible for a postseason berth, but they're undefeated as well, and they really have not looked all that good in a very down Big Ten conference, but they have Wisconsin this week to make a move on the road in Madison. It could be quite interesting to see what the Bucks do against Monty Ball and the Badgers. Here we go. Florida State. ACC is hated by the computers, and probably for good reason. They just get by Virginia Tech. They have Florida at the end of the season to make a leap, especially to boost what the computers think of the Noles, but at this point they're looking like a good but not great one-loss team, which is why they're at number 10. South Carolina, they peaked with the win against Georgia. The schedule was too brutal for them, but a nice win against an Arkansas team that has gotten better but still not all there. Connor Shaw is back healthy. Bruce Ellington had a huge game. Of course, it sets up a very large game against Clemson at the end of the year, and that game is at Clemson. Clemson, the schedule has been very nice for the Tigers since Florida State, and obviously they finished with South Carolina and have an opportunity to make a statement, even though they're not going to the ACC championship game. Stanford, of course, gets by a very talented and ranked Oregon State team at home. They hold on with the new quarterback, Kevin Hogan, and his reward, he gets Oregon, your number 1 team, on the road this week. Sets up for a huge matchup, of course, now with Rose Bowl implications for Stanford. They still control their own destiny with UCLA and Oregon still left on the schedule, but it's going to be near impossible to get it done in Eugene. Oklahoma has West Virginia this week, a nice win last week over Baylor, who was able to score a little bit on the Sooners and make it close, but really not all that competitive. So a huge game against West Virginia. Against a West Virginia defense that's pretty awful. So look for Landry Jones to have a yard or two. And finally, at number 15, we have the Texas Longhorns re-entering the power rankings after a very nice foot-on-a-throat victory against Iowa State. Really looking like they should have looked all season given the talent in Austin, but they have an opportunity to make amends for the real sloppy play early on against Kansas State and act as a spoiler in the final week of the season. Huge, huge matchup. There it is. These are the power rankings. I imagine Notre Dame people are still going to be upset over things I've said, but it happens. Who's too high, who's too low? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you soon.